Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph, 8 lines from the top. The Torah tells us when you will come into the land that Hashem gave you as an inheritance. The pasuk goes on to say, and I will give you negatzaras on your houses, achuzaschem, those houses that were your inheritance. There the Gemara disputes, what is it? Is it including Yushalayim or not? According to Tanna Kama, it does, yes, include Yushalayim. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, those houses are not included in Yushalayim. The Gemara wants to know, what is the machlokes? B'mai ka mifligi. What are they arguing about? Says the Gemara, Tanna Kama sover Yushalayim lo nischalka lishvatim. Rabbi Yehuda sover Yushalayim nischalka lishvatim. Their argument is whether the shvatim, namely Yehuda and Binyamin, got the territory of Yerushalayim, or do we say no, it all belongs to all of the Shvatim? The Gemara says, "Uplukta dahani tanoi." Their machlokes of whether Yerushalayim was nischalik or not is in fact a machlokes amongst other tanoim in the following brisos. Says the Gemara, "The Tanya maha yemechelkoi shel Yehuda." This bris says, what was in the chelik of Yehuda? Har habayis halishkois va'azoros. The har habayis all the way east, going towards the west, the area between the har habayis and the azoros is the lishkois, those rooms, those chambers, and then the three azoros, the Ezras Noshim, the Ezras Yisrael, and the Ezras Kohanim, all were in the land of Yehuda. Umaha yubechalko shebinyam. The Brisa continues, what was in the chelik of Binyamin? Ulam veheichal ubeis kodesh hakadoshim. The ulam all the way toward the west, entering into the heichal where the golden mizbeach was, as well as the menorah on the south and the shulchan on the north, and then of course the kodesh hakadoshim where the Aron was located. V'retzua haisa yoytze mechalko sheYehuda nichneses. The Brisa says there was a ritzua, a piece of land between the area of Yehuda and entering into the south side of the Mizbeach that was entering the area of Binyamin. In other words, Binyamin's portion included even the Mizbeach and westwards. And there was a ritzua that was coming from, let's say, the Azoros, and then south to the south side of the Mizbeach itself. Ubohaya Mizbeach Bonoi, and that's where Mizbeach was Bonoi. In other words, there was an area of the Yesod that was belonging to Yehuda, but the entire Mizbeach still belonged to Binyamin. Ubinyamin had tzadik ha-mitztair aleh lebelo lekol yom. The Brisa states that Binyamin Tzaddik was mitztair, he was in pain over the fact that Yehuda would have his portion entering into the altar, which should be belonging to him. Shneimar says, "Choyfech alav kol hayoim." The pasuk Pashup Pshat says that Akash Baruch Hu, he protected him the entire kol hayoim, all the day. But the drasha is that it says that he scratched, so to speak, he rubbed in pain and agony over the fact that, again, Yehuda, his portion would enter the Mizbeach where he wanted his portion to be. Lefikach zocha Binyamin hatzadik v'nase ushpizichon legvura. Therefore, the Torah comes and is menachem Binyamin. It says, "Don't you worry." Not only that, but you will have the Shechina rest in your portion, referring to the Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, as it states in the Mar ubenk sof of Shachin. In other words, Aron HaKodesh will be in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and that's where Akash Baruch Hu's presence will ultimately be. That's one Tana in regards to showing that both Binyamin and Yehuda had their chelek in Yerushalayim. So it was yes nischalku Yerushalayim, and therefore as a result there would be yes the tumas of the bayis for tzaras. However, there's another Tana that's chelek. V'hai Tana savi Yerushalayim lo nischalku lishvatim. There's another Tana who holds that Yerushalayim was not nischalik lishvatim, but rather belonged to all of the shvatim. The Tanya says in the following brisa, "Ein maskirin batim b'Yushalayim lefi she'eino shalahen. When the Oile Regalim would come to Yerushalayim, they would not have to rent out the houses from those who reside in Yerushalayim, but rather they're able to stay there for free. Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok Oimer af lo mitois. Even the beds they were not able to rent out to these people to lodge in. Why? Because it belonged to all of the Shvatim. Yerushalayim did. Lefikach oiros kochim balish ushpizichoin noitlin oison bezra. The Bryce, however, concludes, however, that those who stayed there would give their oros for the kochim, the kochikalim that belonged to them, the hides from their animals that they gave as korbanos. They had those, and they should be given to the owners of the houses who they were staying by. And if not, they can rightfully take it with might if they needed to. Omar Abayi, however, Abayi says from here we can learn out derech eretz shmamina orach aro l'mishbak inish gulfo umishcha ushpize. From here we learn out derech eretz that one who stayed in one's home, he should leave a jug of cheres, meaning a clay earthenware jug, as well as the arois, the hides for the host. In other words, once we see that is the derech eretz, so the Chachamim enacted that if they do not want to then give that to their host after staying with them in Yerushalayim for free, then indeed the host can rightfully take it for themselves. Now the Gemara goes back to what we said before. On the top of the Amud, the Gemara had brought two different opinions as to whether we say a Beis HaKnesses is mitame negoim or not. In other words, does a Beis HaKnesses have the wherewithal to then be susceptible to tumas negoim, tzaras? So there was a machlokes. One Tana says yes, another Brisa says no. So Gemara resolved that with three different resolutions. The third one, at the top of the Amud, discusses a chiluk between a Beis HaKnesses from Kfarim, which is recognizable because it has certain owners and therefore it's considered to be like a shutfis, whereas a Beis HaKnesses from the Krochim, with a metropolis, many people are traveling and using that Beis HaKnesses on their visits. There it's something that is considered to be not something that's susceptible to Tumah. So says the Gemara, asking, is that true? The Gemara challenges this third answer. Are you saying indeed that a Beis HaKnesses in Kfarim can be susceptible to Tumas Negoim? Vehatanya, behold, it says in the Pasuk, the Brisa quotes, La'achuza, it'll be an inheritance, the land of Eretz Yisrael. Ache yichbeshu oiso, until Klai Yisrael will be koivesh, the land. Kifshu oiso v'lo chilku l'shvatim, even if it was koivesh, the land, but it was not yet mechalik to the shvatim, or chilku l'shvatim v'lo chilku l'beis ha'avos, or it was mechalik to the shvatim, but did not then mechalik it to the families of those tribes of the shvatim. Chilku l'beis ha'avos ve'en kol echad makir eshaloi, or they were mechalik even to the families of the shvatim, but it's not recognizable to whom does it each one belong to. Minayin, where do we know that it's not susceptible to tumah, all of these things, until all of this is so that it actually is recognizable to each one who is the owner? Talmud Loimar, it says in the Pasuk, Ubo asher loy habayis, and the house, and that is to him the house that he will come. Misha miyuchad loy, that which is specific to him. Yatsu elu she'en miyuchadin loy, to exclude these that are not miyuchadin loy, and therefore a Beis HaKnesses Kfarim is not going to be exactly identifiable who is the owner. Ella answers the Gemara, you're right, we can't use that as the third of the three resolutions that we tried mentioning above. Ella mechavarta kedashanina miikara, rather it is like clear the first, the way we explained before, and that is either it's a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says that Beis HaKnesses does yes mitkame betuma negoim, as well as it also chayiv mezuzos, and the other Tana says no. Or you can say that the Rabban and the other Tana says when it has a Beis HaKnesset that has somebody who's a shamash, who has a place of residency, one room in it, then it is mitam negoyim, and who adin are also then mechayiv and mezuzah, and the other brayos talking where it did not have a room where a shamash lives in. The Gemara quotes the Mishnah, Maskinin loy kohen acher, on Yom HaKippurim, we prepare a second kohen, just in case the original kohen gadol becomes tamei. Says the Gemara, Pshita eira boy pasul psul kohen tamei shel shachar mechanchin oisay mitovit shel shachar. That's very poshut, very straightforward. When indeed the kohen gadol became pasul, that right before the bringing of the korban tamei, first thing in the morning on Yom HaKippurim, then the new kohen gadol in his place can go ahead and wear the 8 begadim and perform that service of bringing up the korban tamei shel shachar. Ela eira by psul achar tamei shel shachar b'meh mechanchin oisoi. But if it occurred after the bringing up of the korban tamei shel shachar, how will it become identifiable that this now kohen is mischanech to do the avodah as a kohen gadol? In other words, after the bringing of the korban tamei shel shachar, then begins the avodas of Yom HaKippurim, of the inner type of avodah, where the kohen gadol only wears the 4 vestments of the kohen hedyot. So why is that? How is that going to be recognizable to then show that he's now the kohen gadol? The Gemara says, he says with the sash, the belt that the kohen gadol will wear. In other words, this answer is saying that throughout the entire year, the kohen hedyot wears only a belt that has wool and linen together, shatnez, and on Yom HaKippurim, the kohen gadol wears one that is completely with linen. That's very well according to the one who says that the same avneit of the kohen gadol is the avneit of the kohen hedyot. Throughout the year, they both wear an avneit made out of shatnez, wool and linen together. Only on Yom HaKippurim, the kohen gadol wears now an avneit solely made out of linen. Then it's going to be recognizable. But if you're going to say that the kohen gadol's avneit is not the same as the kohen hedyot, I mean the kohen hedyot wears all year long a sash, an avneit of linen. So when the kohen gadol wears now the sash of linen on Yom HaKippurim, is not going to be distinguishable. Michael Lememar. Omar Abaye says, Loivesh shmoine umahapech bitzinoro. He says that he will wear all 8 garments, as the kohen gadol normally does, and he will then perform a small avodah by taking one of the evarim of the korban tamei shel shachar that's on the mizbeach, and he will turn it over, making it quickened to be burnt. Like Rav Huna said, Dom Rav Huna, Zar shehofach b'tzinora chay miso. A zar who takes the fork and is mahapech the limb of the animal on the mizbeach is chayev miso, which we see that's considered to be an avodah. So that would be a viable way of distinguishing the kohen to be a kohen gadol, because he now does an avodah with the 8 garments of the kohen gadol. Rav Papa said an alternative answer on top of Yud Beis Amud Beis. Avoidasa mechanachtoi. His own avodah, which is the avodah that can only be done by the kohen gadol on Yom HaKippurim, that itself will then determine that he's the kohen gadol. Milotanya, don't we have a precedent? It says in the Brayso, Kol hakelim she'osa Moshe mishichason mekadashton. All of the kelim that Moshe Rabbeinu used, those kelim, when he did the anointed the oil on them, that was mekadesh them. However, mikan ve'elich, says the Brayso, but afterwards, avoidasa mechanachton. After Moshe Rabbeinu's time, the kelim were then mischanech ayidei the avoid itself. Hachanami avoidasa mechanachto. So too over here we'll say the fact that the Kohen Gadol is now doing the avodah in Yom Kippur, which can only be done by him, that's considered to be that his avodah is going to be mechanech him as the Kohen Gadol.